Good morning. I miss Carla. We're going to continue reading Ghost Squad today by Claribel A. Ortega. And, if you can see this little white thing sticking out of my neck, it's not a bandage, it's a heat patch. Because last night I stretched my neck all weird and now it hurts. So I'm hoping the heat patch will help the muscles relax and then everything will kind of work itself out. So, but it doesn't hurt that bad. I'm okay. I hope everyone had a good weekend. I did. I did some baking. Got a couple Christmas presents. All right. We're going to start today with chapter 7, and we are on page 72. Lucily struggled to keep her eyes open as she sat in the school library the next day waiting for Sid to arrive. Hi. She hadn't gotten home until after 1 a.m. the previous night, and she thanked whatever saint was looking over her that her dad hadn't woken up. What little sleep she had been able to get was interrupted by nightmares of corpses breaking out of their graves, the words of the spell running on repeat in her mind, and the sickly green glow of Mayor Anderson's eyes. The school day had passed in a haze of yawns and eye-rubbing. Lucily even tried splashing her face with cold water in the bathroom, but that didn't seem to help. She wanted nothing more than to go home and take the longest nap in the history of naps. But after what she'd seen in the cemetery, she was even more determined to find something that would help the Firefly spirits and her dad. A few of her classmates were goofing around nearby, and Tilly Maxwell, who seemed to hate Lucily for no good reason, pointed at Lucily's sneakers and whispered something to a girl next to her. They erupted in laughter before walking away. Her sneakers had been white once, but despite her scrubbing them with an old toothbrush and washing her shoelaces, now they were pretty much falling apart. There was even a hole on the side that hadn't been there that morning. Lucily buried her face in the book she was holding, wishing the earth would swallow her whole. Just as Lucily was about to fall asleep, using her book as a pillow, Sid strode into the room and sat down with a huff. Sorry. Band practice went late. Andy got his lips stuck in the tuba again. Lucily yawned in response. Wake up, Lucy. You're gonna want to see this. Sid pulled Babette's book, Magic and the Occult, a History, out of her backpack and flipped it open to a section she'd flagged. I was scanning through it in study hall when I came across this passage. Sid began to read aloud while Lucily followed along. Las Brujas Moradas, or the Purple Coven, was a well-known coven from Logroño, Spain. During the Spanish Inquisition, their oldest member, Alanza, was accused of being a witch. The coven attempted to fight back, but the village ran them out, so the coven fled to the small coastal city of St. Augustine, Florida. They spent their days caring for the sick of St. Augustine and helping bring new life into the world, as well as protecting the city from... Sid looked at Lucily, her eyes wide. What? What, Sid? Lucily nearly tipped over in her seat. As well as protecting the city from dangerous and malicious spirits. The weight of the words sent Lucily slumping back into her chair. Mama had mentioned something about there being another ancient order served with protecting St. Augustine. Could she have been referring to Las Brujas Moradas? Sid continued to read. Many townspeople believed that the Purple Coven had a book of magic filled with curses and hexes, while others believed it was the source of their power and the very thing that protected their city. The book is said to contain the most powerful magical spells, including healing, love, and resurrection. Sid paused before she read the next part. The last known documentation of such a book existing claimed that it had been buried somewhere in the Tolomato Cemetery. To this day, no book has ever been found. OMG, Lucily said as Sid closed the book. Do you think... It has to be, said Sid. Babette said she'd found this book in the cemetery, remember? Maybe she found the spell book there, too. But we tried one of the spells already, and it didn't work. That doesn't mean that there aren't others hidden around town. If we keep searching, I'm sure we'll be able to find more clues that will lead us in the right direction. But we don't have time for a scavenger hunt, Sid. It could take us weeks or months or even years to find the spell we need. I don't know how long my fireflies can keep holding on. Sid wrapped her arms around Lucily, pulling her into a hug as tears began to wet her eyes. If there's anyone who could find the spell, it would be the two of us, Lucy. Magic or no magic, I will always be right by your side. We're a team. Lucily knew that Sid was right. If they had any chance of bringing Mama back, of making sure her spirit family was okay, they had no choice but to track down the rest of the missing pages. You're right. We have to find the spell, Sid, Lucily said, more determined than ever. But you know we can't do this alone. You're not going to like this, but... Sid gave Lucily a probing look. Babette is the only one who can help us. She's probably hiding an encyclopedic knowledge of magic in her hair or something. Sid crossed her arms in front of her chest. My answer is still no way. Not unless you plan on pulling double dusting duty when she inevitably punishes us for meddling again. Before Lucily had a chance to respond, to beg for Sid's help, the windows of the library blew open with a loud crash, sending papers flying and causing Sid and Lucily to scream in unison. When Lucily had gotten to the library earlier in the afternoon, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Now the sky was blotted out with menacing black clouds. Wind and rain raged in through the open library windows, louder than Tia Milagros after someone had made a mess in the house. The hair on Lucily's arms stood on end. Something wasn't right. She collapsed to the ground, gasping for air as the memory of the fire-breathing mist monster consumed her. Something bad is coming. It's coming with the rain. As quickly as the memory came, it vanished. Lucily's vision slowly returned to the room. It felt as if she was being pulled from the depths of the ocean toward the surface. By the time Sid's face had come into focus, Lucily could tell by her expression that whatever had just happened terrified her. Mr. Castañeda, the school librarian, ran into the room to see what all the commotion was about. Are you girls okay? I've never seen a storm like this. Sid was the first to break eye contact, responding with a nervous laugh. We're fine, Mr. C, just a bit of wind and rain. He got to work trying to close the windows, but they refused to budge. Mr. Castañeda was soaked in seconds. A fog began to roll into the room, moving toward them like a fox on the hunt, but only Lucily and Sid seemed to notice it. Lucily Luna. A haunting voice cut through the howling wind and seemed to whisper in their ears. What was that? Who's speaking? Sid's question was met with no response. We should probably get out of here, Lucily shouted. Mr. Castañeda finally surrendered. I'm going to go get the janitor. Maybe he can help me close these windows. You girls shouldn't go out in this storm. Wait here. The moment Mr. Castañeda was gone, they heard what sounded like footsteps behind one of the stacks. This isn't funny, Sid called out. Quit hiding and show yourself. Sid wielded a large book above her head, while Lucily clung on to Sid's backpack as they inched closer to the house. Hello? Sid called out, and this time something answered. A chorus of low moans echoed throughout the room, vibrating the very air around them. Lucily pulled Sid back as she swung the book wildly into the air, screaming. Come on, Lucily said. They broke into a run just as one of the bookshelves came crashing down where they had been standing. Transparent figures glided across the floor, arms outstretched towards Lucily and Sid. Their movements were jerky and unnatural. These were nothing like the spirits Lucily had grown up with. These were monsters. They looked like smaller versions of the fire-breathing mist monster from her vision, with gaping black holes where their eyes and mouths should have been. Sid, keep moving. Lucily grabbed Sid's hand and ran faster than she had in her entire life. What are those things? Sid's voice quivered with disbelief. The air was frigid, causing goosebumps to form all over Lucille's body. A smell like dead mice and ancient earth filled the room as the ghosts attempted to surround them. "What now?" she asked. "This way." Sid pulled Lucille under a low arch in the section where the kindergarten class had reading time. Lucille's calves ached. They were running in circles trying to avoid the ghosts, but they weren't getting any closer to the exit. "Lucille Luna!" The voices boomed from every corner of the library as Lucille pulled Sid into a small alcove. "How do they know your name?" Sid asked, clearly terrified. Lucille shook with fear. "I don't want to think about that right now. We have to find a way to distract them long enough to escape." "Can they even be distracted?" "No idea, but it's worth a shot. And I have a plan." After filling Sid in, Lucille dropped down to all fours, crawling as quietly as she could until she reached a row of the old computers they used during design class. Going down the line as quickly as she could, she pressed the power button on every tower. Sid was doing the same on the opposite side of the library. Once she was finished, Lucille looked around to make sure the coast was clear. She could hear the ghosts wailing somewhere near the sci-fi section. They swept the floor with their blank faces and sunken black voids for eyes. She looked across the library to her left, where Sid was standing waiting for her signal. She nodded, and they took off at a sprint toward the door, hoping their plan would work. As Lucille approached the last set of bookshelves, one of the monsters materialized directly in front of her, blocking her path. Lucille came to a sudden halt, frozen with fear. "Lucille," the monster hissed, "come with me." She couldn't move, though she wanted to, couldn't scream, though she was trying to. All Lucille could do was close her eyes and pray that she would make it out of there alive. The evil spirit growled at her, a horrifying expression of glee on its face. The gaping maw where its mouth should have been stretched across its face in some terrible mimic of a smile. Then, in a voice made of nightmares, it began to sing, "Duérmase mi niña, duérmase mi amor." A scream caught in Lucille's throat. It felt as if the monster were ripping her spirit right out of her body as it sang the very lullaby Mama always sang to her. Her eyes were becoming heavy, and despite the fear hammering in her heart, she knew she was moments from losing consciousness and falling into the clutches of the monster. "Lucille!" Sid's voice cut through the haze just as the computers finished booting up, blasting the Windows intro music throughout the library at full volume. Lucille snapped out of the trance in a stupor. The monster that just moments before had been sucking the very life out of her fled toward the center of the room, where the horde of evil spirits were descending on the computers like a tornado in a flurry of howls and mist. Lucille ran to Sid, who was standing by the exit, and together they burst through the doors and into the rain, grabbing their bikes and pedaling away from the library as fast as they could. When they finally stopped, so had the wind and rain. Sid hopped off her bike and collapsed onto a patch of grass, not caring that it was wet since they were both already soaked through. "What just happened?" Sid asked, still trying to catch her breath. "We almost got poltergeisted, that's what. And I think one of them was trying to give me some sort of dementor's kiss." Lucille tried not to burst into tears. "Sid, this is bad, real bad. Whatever just happened, whatever those things were, I'm almost positive it was entirely our fault." That's the end of chapter 7. Hello. Let's see. Chapter 8 is very short, so I think we're going to be able to do chapter 8 and chapter 9. "Mama." Lucille cupped her grandmother's mason jar in her hands. "Mama, despierta." She examined Mama's tiny firefly, hoping for some kind of sign, but Mama still didn't stir. Not even her wings fluttered now. Lucille sat down at the base of the willow tree, defeated. Absolutely everything was upside down. She was losing her family's home, Mama was gone, and now she and Sid may have accidentally been responsible for the arrival of those evil phantoms at the library. Lucille hid her face in her hands and let the tears come. She had never felt so alone. ¿Y esa lloradera? A shrill voice floated down from one of the top branches, small at first, then louder as it got closer. ¿Qué te pasa? Tia Milagros sat next to Lucily on the ground, looking uncomfortable. This Tia was not the type to sit on the grass and chat. Her hobbies were more akin to a neighborhood gossip, always perched on a rocking chair or peeking through the blinds, tutting her teeth at everyone and everything. When she wasn't cleaning, that is. She made the best pastelitos, though, the kind with ground beef and scrambled eggs. So she wasn't all bad. Do you know what's wrong with Mama? Lucily wiped her eyes and sniffed. Tia Milagros' face was in a perpetual scowl that served only to enhance the curlers and face masks that she passed away in and were now her permanent state of being. But upon Lucily's question, her face softened. Then her expression turned grave. She sighed. I'm not sure. I have never seen this happen before, even when I was a young girl, Tia Milagros said in a heavy accent. Lucily hesitated before gathering the courage to tell her about the spell she and Sid had found in the cemetery. We were just trying to help. Do you think we might have made things worse? Tia Milagros reached for Lucily's hand. No, mija. I do not know what is happening, but I do know that no child is capable of this. Brujeria. This is a dark magic. The storm is bringing something with it, something evil. Every day we feel it growing stronger. And Mama's not the only one affected by it. I feel it in the air, heavy on my bones, on all our bones, like we are being stretched too thin. Manny, Lucily said, remembering her cousin's fit the other night and the terrifying vision that followed. Manny, Mama, Tio Elido, me, we've all been having nightmares. Tia Milagros' voice was small, afraid. Lucily gasped, and despite the suffocating heat, a shiver took over her limbs. It's like we're reliving our own deaths and then everything after. Everything you are spared from enduring when you cross over. All the pain and tears of our family and our loved ones. Tia Milagros clutched her locket, which Lucily knew had a picture of her children and husband, all still alive and living in New York. It's painless to die, Lucily. It's peaceful. What hurts the most is watching those you loved in life mourn you in death. It's enough to break a heart, even one as hard as mine. Lucily threw her arms around her Tia. I don't know what to do, how to help. Her world seemed to be crumbling around her like a week-old cookie she left in her pocket. How could she fix this? Where would she even begin? I'll talk to the others to see if they have any ideas, Tia Milagros said. We Lunas are not the giving up type. You have your father's spirit in you, all our spirits. You are the only one who can stop this, Lucily. We believe in you. Chapter 9. Lucily avoided buses whenever she could. The tough material covering the seats always reeked of caked-in sweat and burnt plastic. But her class trip to City Hall was their best opportunity to spy on Mayor Anderson, to see what he was really up to. Lucily was sure she had seen him that night in the cemetery. They had to find out if he was connected to the ghost somehow. Sid had saved Lucily the window seat because she knew how sick she got on buses. Ready to be spies? Sid whispered, wiggling her eyebrows. Lucily smiled. Yep, got my dad's tape recorder from his dresser last night. Good thing he sleeps like a rock. They went over their plan in hushed voices, heads together for the entire drive. City Hall was an extravagant building with a giant fountain and perfectly manicured gardens out front. It reminded Lucily of pictures she'd seen of the architecture in Spain with its terracotta roofs. Rain was coming down in sheets as the class poured out of the bus in their school-issue yellow ponchos. They looked like ducklings following Mr. Lopez into the building as he went over the rules. Everyone had a buddy to keep them from wandering off for any reason. Lucily had no issue adhering to the buddy system since she and Sid did that even when it wasn't required. The not wandering off part, not so much. She threw Sid a knowing look as they filed into the building, making sure to stick to the back near the class aide. Mrs. Stein was nice enough, but she was also like 98 years old, and they had a much better chance of giving her the slip than Mr. Lopez. Lucily and Sid followed their class around for nearly an hour, nodding along and pretending to be interested in the rich history of their city, when really they were thinking of the best way to get up to the government offices without getting caught. Mr. Lopez wouldn't be doing another head count until lunch, and then they'd be wrapping up their tour with a meet and greet with the mayor right before they went home. If they were going to have any chance of picking up something juicy, they needed to record for a few hours. They had to go now. "Bathroom break," Mr. Lopez called from the front of the line, and Lucily knew this might be their only chance. "Okay," she whispered to Sid. "He'll do another count after the bathroom break, and then we make a run for it." "Got it," Sid said. They waited for the rest of their classmates to take their bathroom breaks and line up again. Once Mr. Lopez had done another count, and just as they passed the staircase that would take them to the mayor's office, Lucily and Sid slipped into an open janitor's closet. They peered out from the cracked door, crossing their fingers that they hadn't been caught. Mrs. Stein stopped, looking confused for a moment, before shrugging and continuing. "That was close," Lucily let out a breath. "The wrath of Mrs. Stein has been avoided again." "God forbid she knit us a cozy sweater," Lucily shuddered. Sid laughed and put a hand on Lucily's shoulder. "You've got to work on your jokes, Lucy." They both laughed as they ran up the stairs and toward the mayor's office. Lucily had no idea if he would even be there, but this might be their only chance to figure out how he was involved before it was too late. Palm trees lurched outside the office windows, threatening to snap in the howling winds as the storm continued to rage. Lucily rubbed her arms. The AC was blasting, and that, combined with being out in the rain earlier, made for a chilly situation. She was sick of rain. When they got upstairs, Sid smiled and nodded at the adults she passed in the hallway, as if she belonged there. They probably thought they were someone's kids because nobody stopped to ask them what they were doing there. The mayor's office was at the end of the hall between two giant ferns. On the door was one of those envelopes where people put mail. Lucily hoped the microphone on the recorder was strong enough to pick up sound from inside it. She looked over to Sid, who was busy loitering in front of Mayor Anderson's secretary. "Now," she mouthed, and Sid nodded in response. "Hi, I'm lost. Can you help me?" Sid asked the secretary. A look of panic came over the older man's face as he signaled for Sid to sit down and began asking her questions. Lucily made her move over to the mayor's office, pressed her ear to the door, and heard a deep voice inside. She stepped back quickly so she wouldn't attract any suspicion. He was definitely in there. Lucily looked back at Sid before slipping the recorder into the large envelope on the door, making sure the little red light indicating it was on lit up before she did. Then she turned around and went straight for Sid. "Cinderella," Lucily whispered. Sid snorted at the code name she had insisted on. "I've been looking all over for you. Mr. Lopez asked me to come find you." The man at the desk looked visibly relieved, wiping beads of sweat from his bald head. "You two get back to your teacher now," he said. Lucily nodded, taking Sid by the hand as they ran down the hall. Now they just had to wait. They found their class just as they were walking into the cafeteria for lunch. Lucily slid in right behind Mrs. Stein and coughed as Sid took a sip of water from a fountain right next to her. Mrs. Stein just smiled at them sweetly and shuffled out the door toward the rest of the class. She had seen them, which would be enough, Lucily hoped, to make her think they had been there the entire time. After lunch, Lucily followed her classmates down the hall of offices she had walked past an hour before. She could feel every nerve in her body buzzing. Mr. Lopez gestured toward a man who looked to be about 900 years old. "This is where you pay a parking ticket, and this is where you get a marriage license," he said, introducing the class to a woman who was chewing gum and looking down like she could actually see the germs on the children's faces. When they eventually reached the end of the hallway, Mayor Anderson slipped out from his office like an eel. He was tall, much taller than he looked on television, and wore a beige trench coat and the shiniest shoes Lucy had ever seen. Welcome, class. I am Mayor Anderson, and Lucily watched intently as he droned on. There was something off about him. It was almost as if the words coming from his mouth didn't match up with his lips moving, like he was in a badly dubbed movie or something. She shivered, remembering the thing that had looked like him in the cemetery. Sure, he seemed kind of weird, but not like a giant mist monster. Not even close. Maybe they were wrong about him, Lucily thought briefly. Those monsters couldn't be the same as the person standing before them now, could they? Come in, come in. Don't be shy. The mayor flourished his arm in an exaggerated gesture, and the class trickled into his office cautiously. Lucy tried to lag behind to see if she could snatch the recorder quickly, but the mayor was still standing at the door, smiling down on her. Lucily chuckled nervously and ducked into the office. Sid was nowhere to be found. The mayor swept into the office and stood behind his desk, gesturing for Lucily to join the rest of her class, which had gathered in front of it. Lucily chanced one more look out the door behind her, but Sid wasn't there. She had been with her just a moment ago. Reluctantly, she joined her classmates, craning her neck every few seconds to look for Sid. A few minutes later, Sid sauntered into the office with Mrs. Stein in tow. She had to use the ladies' room and couldn't find the right door, she told Mr. Lopez as Sid rejoined the class. Sid winked at Lucily, patting the side pocket on her jacket casually. Lucily suppressed an excited smile. The rest of the class trip was an agonizing wait until they were back on the school bus, where they could listen to the recorder undisturbed. They made sure to be the last students to board so that they'd get to sit up front where no one would ask them what they were listening to. Lucily had brought a headphone splitter so they could both listen at the same time. At first there was nothing but static, long stretches of it, broken up only by the occasional person coughing or speaking unintelligibly. Then Lucily thought she heard something muffled. She turned it up, and that's when the voices started. Not just one or two, it was at least 3 people speaking in hushed tones and quick whispers. The plan is in motion, a scratchy, high-pitched voice said. We've only collected 50 so far, which is by no means enough, responded another voice. This one sounded like it had a cold. Quiet! Do you want the bumbling secretary outside to find us out? Mayor Anderson said. Pah! Lucily couldn't tell if this was in response to the mayor or if the second voice had just sneezed. You must continue to collect them and avoid that witch and her annoying assistants, the mayor said. Or better yet, capture them if we can. They would make an excellent additions, especially the cat. Murmurs of agreement resounded, and Lucily looked at Sid, who wore the same startled expression she was sure she wore herself. Witch and her assistants and cats? The voices were talking about them. When will we know it's time? Asked voice 2. I cannot believe you have forgotten again, said the mayor with a sigh. We must collect enough souls before the full moon on Halloween, and then at the stroke of midnight, when the whole town is distracted by the Halloween festival, we complete the ritual. Then we will outnumber them, and the town will be ours to control. One of the voices sounded just like Mayor Anderson, that was for certain. But who were the others? We mustn't forget about that dreadful firefly tree, said the second voice. That is the most important part of all. Their magic has already begun to fade. Soon they'll no longer be able to protect the town. Lucily grabbed Sid's hand tightly, just as the recording stopped. Out of battery. What are we going to do? Asked Lucily in a daze. They knew about her tree, about her ancestors. Whoever was in that office was behind whatever was happening to her family. I'll put my mask on because it's 10 o'clock. That's the end of chapter 9. So we'll pick up with chapter 10 on Wednesday. And I just wanted to let you know, if you are in Providence, Rhode Island, and you come to the libraries in person, next week, this week our hours are regular like they always are. Next week, we are going to be open only Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, leading up to Christmas. And our hours are only going to be from 1 p.m. to 5:30 p.m., I believe. Let me make sure that's correct. Yes, 1 to 5:30, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday next week during the week of Christmas. And then we're going to be closed after that, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and the entire following next week. And we will open up again after New Year's, which is January 4th, Monday, January 4th. So I know that's a lot of changes in the hours, but this week is normal. Next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, in the afternoons will be open, no evenings. And then we'll be closed from Christmas Eve through New Year's and open again January 4th. But I am planning on still doing my read-alouds even when we're closed, that week between Christmas and New Year's. I might change the hours, but I'll let you know, because I want to keep reading through this book so we can see how it ends. And I don't want to have to pause for a whole week and a half. So I'll keep you updated, but I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on that. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.